Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle. Oh, that ball is close. He's given him. He's given him. Peter Siddle's got a hat-trick on his birthday.
Welcome back to the On the Ball podcast. This is episode 63 of the show. Today I am once again doing a solo episode. I promise I will get guests on. It sounds like I'm just loving a bit of me time at the moment, but once again we're talking about cycling. So yeah, I thought it would be only right to do it by myself again. We're just going to do it in a similar structure to the last one. We're just going to talk about each team, talk about their performance in each classification and their performance as a whole over the 2 weeks so far. But yeah, I'm really loving the race at the moment. Might make a few slip-ups today because I am a bit tired because I woke up for both the men's and women's finals of the US Open in the tennis after watching the stage of Tour de France the night before. So I had about 4 hours sleep 2 days in a row. But it should be good. Yeah, really loving the race. Trying to get my little brother into it actually at the moment, which is a bit of a task because although I love cycling, I'm sure all of you do listening and watching. But to an untrained eye, it does kind of just look like a bunch of blokes riding a bike on a road. So, that's my mission. I'm going to try and get him into it so I've got someone to get around it with me. But yeah, before we get into it, obviously do all the good stuff. Subscribe, like to the YouTube channel and YouTube video. Rate us on Apple, the Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and review us and everything you can do. That'd be great. Much appreciated. All right. Without further ado, we'll go from in team order of based on their highest GC rider. So we'll start with Jumbo-Visma. Not much has changed really since last week for them. They are still dominating this race. Every single climb we've been on basically has been led by about 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 6 Jumbo-Visma riders. Last night they really flexed their muscles, just rotating through all their big dogs at the front. Van Aert doing long turns, Georgie Bennett doing long turns, Dumoulin just using him as a lead out man basically on the mountains, which is such a luxury to have. But in terms of the classifications, Primož Roglič, the team leader, he's in yellow at the moment. And I'll be honest, I might do some predictions later on in the episode, but I do not see that jersey being taken off him, really. I think the team is too strong around him, and it would take basically the only way that would happen is if one day he just blew up. Because obviously there's a time trial coming, and he is one of the best time trialists in the world, especially when the course has a little bit of mountains or hills on it. So I think it's stage 20 individual time trial that really suits him. And yeah, I just don't see him slipping up at all. He looks really strong on all the climbs. Obviously has to do less work than pretty much every other GC leader just because his team leads him up so far, up the mountain so far, where he's really out on his own usually for the last kilometre or two. Then for them in 10th, they've got Tom Dumoulin 5 minutes back on his teammate. Obviously not riding for himself, but probably looking good for a top 10, if not a top 5, because, Roglič is getting a lot of support, but if Dumoulin's second last wheel of that Jumbo-Visma train, he's going to end up being on right up there at the end of all the big climbs pretty much, so he could actually sneak into the top 5, and as I mentioned for Roglič, Dumoulin is also a talented time trialist. I think he was once the world champion in the individual time trial, so he'll be licking his lips for stage 20 and could see himself crack into that top 5, but I definitely think he's locked in stage 10, top 10, unless he has a blowout in the mountains. And then Sepp Kuss, just one of the domestics for Roglič, he's in 17th, 34 minutes back, so nothing outrageous, but he himself, same as Dumoulin, might be looking at a top 15 finish, which would be pretty impressive by him. In the other classifications, they've got Wout van Aert, 6th in the green jersey on 131 points. He's not going for it, so there's not really much point talking about it. He's not going to go for the intermediate sprints and stuff like that. King of the Mountains, Primoz Roglic is third, and he could definitely win this jersey. They're not going for it, as I keep saying, but especially in the next 2 or 3 stages, there's some big climbs, big points up for grabs. I do think there's going to be a few more breakaways getting away, because recently the breakaways haven't really been getting away much at all. The peloton's only been letting them get out to 3 or 4 minutes, and then they catch them on the climbs, like they did last night on stage 15. So if they keep doing that, well then Roglic or Pogačar could walk away with the polka dot jersey as a bit of a consolation, or just an added bonus depending on who comes home to Paris with the yellow jersey. In terms of the team classification, they're second. They're not trying to win this, as I keep saying, but they probably will be right up there just because of Roglic, Dumoulin, Kuss, Van Aert, even George Bennett. They're all like outstanding riders in their own right. I was thinking about this before. Imagine if they had Stefan Kruijswijk, who was going to be riding the Tour, I believe, until about 2 weeks beforehand. I think he might have had a crash or something in one of the lead-up races. That would have been insane if he was in their team. Top 10 stages in the last the last week. They had Wout van Aert come third on stage 11. Primoz came second last night on stage 15, and Sepp Kuss was in 6th last night as well. So pretty handy stuff from them. Next up, we've got UAE Team Emirates. Mentioned him a little bit earlier, but Tadej Pogačar is their group team leader. In the GC, he sits second, 40 seconds back on his Slovenian counterpart, Primoz Roglic. Once again, I'll talk about in the predictions at the end of the episode, but he's riding superb at the moment, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can keep this up for 21 days, or if he does blow up on one of the big mountain stages. But at the moment, he looks as strong, if not stronger, than Roglic. Probably just lacks the team around him to help him, which is a bit of a shame, because you never really want to see, it's like F1, you don't really want to see certain riders or drivers given a unfair advantage over others, but that's just the way it rolls, and it is a team sport at the end of the day. So yeah, Tadej Pogačar is great, 21 years old, such an exciting prospect, so fast. Him and Roglic are having a great little series of battles at the top of the climbs to pick up the summit finish or the points. In the green jersey, they've got 2 blokes in the top 10, but as I said before, they're not going for it. They've got Alexander Kristoff on 100 points. He's basically just there through sprint finishes, and Tadej Pogačar himself is in 10th on 97 points, just because of the finishes, the summit finishes that he's been able to get over pretty high up in the standings. And then King of the Mountains, Tadej Pogačar actually sits above Roglic in that on 34 points. And Benoit Cosnefroy, the leader of that, is on 36 points. So depending on how things go in the next couple of days, we could see Tadej Pogačar in the polka dots. And then Tadej Pogačar, he leads the white jersey after Egan Bernal's blow up last night, and he looks pretty comfortable in that classification. So Pogačar could be rolling home with a polka dot and a white jersey, and who knows, maybe even the yellow. So he's riding great. The team's in 11th in the team standings. In terms of top 10s, they had David de la Cruz came 10th on stage 13, and then Tadej Pogačar won stage 15 last night. DNFs, along with Fabio Aru from last week, they had Davide Formolo at the very start of this week, had a crash with some road furniture, which saw his race prematurely end. Third, we've got EF Pro Cycling. Their GC man is Rigoberto Urán. He sits in third, 1 minute and 34 seconds behind. So the gaps were pretty small until last night, and now it's looking like it's a bit of a 2-horse race into Paris. But you never know. Like we saw with Bernal last night, not many people would have expected that, and Roglic could have a day similar to that out of nowhere. So these guys, they're putting the pressure on him and his team. So Urán is 1 minute and 30 back. They're not competing for the green or King of Mountains. In terms of the white jersey, they've got Daniel Felipe Martinez, or Danny Martinez. He's in 5th, but he is 1 hour and 23 back on Tadej Pogačar, and then Nielsen Palace is in 9th, but he's almost 2 hours back on Pogačar. But Both having great campaigns, those two. Martinez had a stage win on stage 13. Great result for him and his team. Hugh Carty also came ninth on that stage, so a good day out for the EF Pro Cycling side. And then last night, Rigoberto Urán snuck into the top 10, coming ninth, but he did drop a little bit of time onto some of the other guys. DNF, they had Sergio Higuita. Unfortunately, he crashed out last night. I didn't actually see it, but he was riding pretty well this tour. He was in the top 20, might have been even top 15. And with the big mountains, he was probably looking to finish inside the top 10. But that is not to be. And unfortunately, that has hurt the team classifications, and they've dropped down to third, 26 minutes back. So they're probably out of that race, which they probably could have been favourites for going into it, I reckon. Fourth, we've got Team Astana. Their GC man is Miguel Angel Lopez. He sits in fourth right now. Had a great day last night. Climbed up the standings. I think he overtook Bernal and Nairo and Quintana. And Guillaume Martin. He's a minute and 45 back on Primoz Roglic. Once again, similar to Urán. At the moment, probably doesn't look likely that he will be able to overtake Roglic or crack back that minute and 45, but he looks really strong on all the climbs. Hasn't really looked threatened, like he never looked like getting dropped on any stage so far. And his team strengthened. I think it's Pelo Bilbao. He was there to the very end last night. Harald Tejada, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, youngster. He was there late last night. So his team is slowly starting to turn it on for him after a pretty bad start from the team. I just mentioned this guy, but Harald Tejada, he is sixth in the white jersey standings, so the young rider, but he is over an hour back, so he's not going to win it. In terms of the team, they're seventh, so not bad for Astana. In terms of the stage finishes, Miguel Angel Lopez came fourth last night, and on stage 12, Hugo Hull came seventh. And then DNF's Jon Izagirre had a pretty nasty crash, actually. Had a bit of blood coming out of, I think it was his eyebrow. I think he might have fallen off and clipped a wall, which is never good to see. But I'm sure he is okay. Next, we've got Mitchelton Scott. For me, this is probably one of the biggest surprises of the tour so far. They publicly declared before coming into it that they were racing for stages, similar to some of the other teams like AG Desert, Le Mondial with Bardet. But by circumstance, or maybe it was just a tactic to put the pressure off, they've ended up riding for GC, and Adam Yates looks like one of the strongest GC contenders in the field. So Adam Yates sits in fifth, 2 minutes and 3 seconds behind Primoz Roglic. And then Esteban Chavez is in 20th, almost an hour back. But in terms of Adam Yates, he has really impressed me this year. He's going to Team Ineos next year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic works. I think I might have mentioned this last week. But yeah, Adam Yates, he was attacking on the climb last night when no one else could, with the high-paced Jumbo-Visma was setting. Which is positive signs. Obviously, that shows that he liked his legs on the day. And I think he actually did a favour to the rest of the team. I think everyone was struggling to keep up with Jumbo-Visma's pace. I know this sounds a bit like a bit of a paradox, but his attack kind of crushed Jumbo-Visma's pace a little bit and brought their train from about 5 to 2 or 3. So I think that saved a few of the riders out the back of that pack, actually. I thought after his attack, someone else could have attacked because Jumbo-Visma did look a little bit, not vulnerable, but they looked like they could have been attacked once Bennett and Van Aert had been dropped following those Yates attacks. But I don't think anyone had the legs, and Dumoulin was setting a pretty fast pace at the front. They're not really competing for any other jerseys. In terms of team classification, they're in ninth. Stage finishes, they've had Luka Mezek had an array of top 10. So in stage 10 he came 10th, stage 11th he came 7th, stage 14 he came 2nd, but that was the one where Soren Kragh Andersen, he attacked with about 2Ks to go. So Mezek actually won the bunch sprint, so that was frustrating. I watched the Backstage Pass, which is the YouTube series by Mitchelton Scott, where they bring you behind the scenes information. And Matt White, the sporting director of Mitchelton Scott, he was pretty shattered about that because, as I just said, he realised that Luka Mezek won the bunch sprint, but just didn't happen to win the race, which is pretty rare. Usually those things go hand in hand, which hurts. And then Adam Yates, last night, he was in 8th position. DNF, they had Sam Bewley. He crashed out on stage 10. It kind of went into like this ditch, and then his front wheel got clogged into the mud, kind of, and he went over the front handlebars. Didn't look too good. Next up, we've got Trek Segafredo. So from Australian team to Australian rider, we have Richie Port. He is in 6th, 2 minutes and 13 back. I've probably said this about every man in the top 6, but there's a reason for it. But Richie Port looks really good. He has not looked like being dropped at all. And in most of the climbs, he's usually on the back of the Jumbo-Visma train, so he's right at the front of the pack. He hasn't really had the legs or tactical nous to do an attack yet off his own back. He's followed attacks and all that easily. So that's maybe something he might be looking to do in the next few stages. Because I don't think... He's a pretty handy time trialist himself, but I don't think he'll be fancying having to catch... a minute up on Roglic and Pogacar on the time trial. Not sure if that's too possible for Richie. But he's doing well. Tom Scoynes is the only man in another classification. He's 8th in the King of the Mountains, 24 points. He hasn't accumulated a point, though, this week. That was all from the first week. In terms of the team, they're coming 5th. They were quite up there for that. But then Bauke Mollema, he DNF'd on stage 13. And since then, I think they've fallen down those standings quite a bit because he would have been up there in the top 20 of most mountain stages, and they could have had a real tussle with some of the other teams for that team classification. In terms of the top 10 finishes in stages, they had quite a few like they did in the first week. I think they've had the most overall out of any team, maybe next to Sunweb. On stage 10, they had Mats Pedersen come 5th, Jasper Stuyven come 10th. Stage 11, they had Mats Pedersen come 6th. Stage 12, they had Kenny Elissonde come 9th. Stage 14, they had Jasper Stuyven come 6th. And stage 15, they had Richie Port come 3rd. So they're having a pretty successful tour. If it wasn't for Bauke Mollema's crashing, DNFing, they could have been looking at 2 top 10 finishes in the GC, maybe even a team classification win and multiple top 10s. So they're doing really well. Next up, we've got Bahrain McLaren. They had a good week, but I think if you looked at their standings on week 1, you maybe would have expected them to jump a little bit higher. But by all means, they haven't done bad at all. Mikel Landa, he is sitting in 7th, 2 minutes and 16 back on Primoz Roglic. Damiano Caruso is in 14th, but he's 9 minutes back on Roglic, and then Pello Bilbao is 43 minutes back on Roglic, sneaking into the top 20 in 19th position. So they've got three in the top 20. I think they're the only other team, apart from Jumbo-Visma, to be able to say that, which is a pretty impressive feat. Their team is starting to look stronger day after day. Oh, I said Pello Bilbao was on Astana before. Sorry, he's on Bahrain McLaren. So last night they had 3 men in about the final 10 in terms of that elite group of climbers, which is good to see. And although I do accuse Caruso of maybe being a little bit selfish sometimes, I think sometimes he's kind of riding for himself as opposed for his team leader. I think he's done that on a few occasions, in my opinion. But they had 3 in that group, which has got to help Landa somehow. And then in terms of the team classification, they're in 4th, but they might, in the next couple mountain stages after the rest day, they might, raise a few positions in that one. In that classification, could push for podium. And then top 10 finishes, they haven't had many, to be honest. They only had 2 in the first week, and then they've had 2 this week. Sonny Colbrelli managed 9th on the 14th stage, and Mikel Landa came 7th last night on stage 15. DNF, they didn't have any DNFs this week. They had Rafael Valls is still their only guy who isn't in the race yet. He crashed out on stage 1. Next up, we've got Movistar. They sit in 8th on the GC with Enric Mas, 3 minutes and 15 seconds back from Primoz Roglic. So, if I'm honest, barring a magical series of events, these are probably the guys who you can definitively rule out. You could probably be a bit ballsier and basically rule out from about 3rd onwards, but just to be thorough, we don't want to. Someone 2 minutes back could do something special, but I think 3 minutes plus back, especially with that time trial waiting, I don't think these guys are in contention. Maybe not even in contention for a podium, to be honest. Enric Mas, 3 minutes and 15 seconds back. Alejandro Valverde sits in 12th, 6 minutes and 52 seconds back. So they've done pretty well. 2 leaders in the top 12. That's, Team Sky kind of eliteness there. But they would like to have Mas a little bit higher. I think he started pretty slow, but he's really ramped it up the last couple of days. Last night he was very impressive. He came 5th on the stage, and Alejandro Valverde was also in 10th on the stage. So they had a really good night last night. Hopefully from the rest day they come back and ride similarly well. They lead the team classification, which they so dearly, they hold in such high prestige. That team classification, I think they've won 4 of the last 5. I said that on the last potty. In terms of the white jersey, Enric Mas sits in 2nd, 2 minutes and 35 back. So he's probably not going to be able to catch Pogačar in that one, barring, I don't wish this upon him, but barring a crash or something, or an extreme mechanical. But yeah, he'll be on the podium for the white jersey, top 10. Enric Mas will probably pretty much definitely be top 10 for GC. So all in all, it's a pretty great tour for him. But yeah, Movistar doing pretty well. They improved this week. I think they started the tour quite slowly. Didn't really get into the action. They had 2 in the top 20, but now they're really starting to push in the high mountains, which they always love. Next up, we've got Arkea Samsic. Their team leader is Nairo Quintana. He's in 9th position at the moment, 5 minutes back on Primoz Roglic. So I was saying it about Enric Mas, but this is guaranteed now. These guys are completely out of the running, really. In 15th, they have Warren Barguil. He's 32 minutes back, but I do think he could be a little bit higher, but he's kind of sacrificed himself for his team leader, which we love to see. To be honest, they've not really got much else going for them. They were doing really well until last night. Nairo cracked on the same mountain that Egan Bernal did. I think it's called like the Grand Colombier. But it wasn't too great for the Colombian. So unfortunately, Quintana has been distanced by the main GC favourites, basically. 5 minutes back, don't see him winning it back, really. Pretty hard to attack when you've got Jumbo-Visma controlling the pace the whole way up the mountains. But yeah, we'll see how he goes. Hopefully some fireworks from Arkea Samsic, maybe a few 1-2 punches with Quintana and Barguil, because there's not really much point settling for 9th. If you're going to go out, you may as well go out with a bang. So hopefully the 2 or 3 stages after the rest day, they really send it. They're 10th in the team classification, and they're not really in the running for any other classifications. They didn't have a top 10 finish this week, so it's been a bit of a nothing week really for Arkea Samsic till last night, where unfortunately our man Quintana did crack. Next we got Cofidis, who similarly Guillaume Martin really struggled last night. He's had a bit of misfortune with a few mechanicals and stuff like that, but last night really looked like he had reached his limits. He's now sitting in 11th, which by no means is a bad position to be at all. He's 6 minutes and 45 seconds back. So he could push for top 10. He's about a minute and a half back on Tom Dumoulin. So potentially if a few of the other GC favourites crack in the next couple of days and Martin returns to his strong form from earlier in the tour, he could push for top 10, which would be a great result for him. In terms of Cofidis, not much going on really. Not much else going on, sorry. They've got Jesus Herrada sitting in 7th in the King of the Mountains jerseys. He is on 25 points, so he's 11 points back on Cosnefroid. They're 13th in the team classification. In terms of stage finishes, they had Elia Viviani get a 4th on stage 10, Jesus Ferrada get a 5th on stage 12, Nicholas Ade got a 6th on stage 13, and Simone Consoni got 3rd on stage 14. Elia Viviani still question marks over him. He did get a 4th, so he's obviously not in the worst of form, but we'll see how he goes. I think stage 19 could be won by a sprinter. It's a little bit hilly. Well, not hilly, but there's like rolling hills right through from the start to the finish. But no categorized climbs, I don't believe. And then obviously the final stages for the sprinters, so we'll see how he performs in those two. But yeah, Cofidis, not much going for them now, really, that Martin's out of the race for the yellow jersey. I guess he'll just try and go for the top 10. Jesus Ferrada might try and make a push for that King of the Mountains jersey, and then Viviani all attention will turn to Viviani on stage 19 and 21. Next, we've got Ineos Grenadiers. They've really fallen last night, similar to Cofidis and RK Samsic was a dark night in the team's tour. I don't know. It's a tough one for Ineos. I'm sure they're a little bit red-faced at the moment. Not saying that taking Egan Bernal was a bad decision, but all the controversy over them not taking Thomas and Froome, and now they're going to struggle to even get a top 10 with Bernal. It kind of looks like they may have made the wrong decision, or in the eyes of, I'm sure, Froome and Thomas anyway. So Bernal sits in 13th, 8 minutes back on Roglic. Richard Carapaz is 16th, but he is over 32 minutes back. But yeah, not much going for Ineos anymore. Bernal, they're not really going to let him attack. He's only 8 minutes behind. But yeah, we'll see how he goes in the mountains. We'll see if he can group it together or he just loses the plot like Thibaut Pinot. He's 3rd in the white jersey, but he is pretty much the same distance back there. He's 7 minutes and 45 seconds back, so that's probably out of reach as well. Barring, a crash or something to the top two. The team sits in 6th, 53 minutes and 39 seconds back. They've had no top 10s in the last week, so similar to RK Samsic, now that their leader's out, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Maybe Carapaz has a bit of an attack. He hasn't done too much really. He's kind of just been there with Bernal in the end, when it gets down to the elite climbers. So maybe he'll do something. But yeah, last night was just strange. So he got dropped, I understand that, but I don't know if his legs were just completely off, like Thibaut Pinot's were, have been pretty much the whole week. But he just seemed to give up. Like, I genuinely don't know if he did or not. But, like, Kwiatkowski was in front of him, and he looked like he was, like, struggling to ride as slow as he could to help nurse Bernal through that final climb. Like, Kwiatkowski looks like he could have just burnt him if he wanted to. So I don't really know what was going on there. Maybe he just had enough and realised that he was going to lose, so he just thought, well, we may as well just take it easy. But I don't know. It was just a bizarre thing to see, really. I know it's not the Team Sky that was anymore, but it was still strange to see such a successful team collapse like that. But yeah, I guess it spices up the race. Well, not really. Now it's just Jumbo-Visma, but got a new champion anyway. Next up, we've got B&B Hotels Vital Concept. Their GC, well, not GC man, but their main man on the GC classification is Pierre Roland. He sits in 18th, 41 minutes behind Primoz Roglic. Brian Coquard sits in 4th in the green jersey, 166 points. That puts him, how many points back? So Sam Bennett's on 269. That puts him over 100 points back. So he's probably out of that, barring a miracle win on stage 19 and stage 21. And maybe some misfortune to some of the others. Pierre Roland sits in 6th position on the polka dot jersey. He's 10 points back from Benoit Cosnefroy. And Pierre Roland looked really good last night in the big mountains. So maybe over the next few stages we could see him get into the breakaway or be in the elite group of climbers and then make an attack and try and pick up that polka dot jersey. Would be great to see always, well, Benoit Cosnefroy is French, but I love Pierre Rolland, legend in the sport, so it would be great to see him in the polka dots. Their team is in 16th position in the team classification. Their top 10s, they've had quite a few actually. So in the stage 10, they had Brian Coquard come 7th, 11th. In stage 11, they had Brian Coquard come 4th. Stage 12, they had Pierre Rolland come 2nd. Stage 12, similarly, they had Quentin Pacher come 4th. And finally, on stage 13, they had Pierre Rolland come 5th. So they're climbing well. They're setting up the sprints well. They're just, unfortunately, Brian Coquard is not finishing them off at the moment, which is pretty frustrating. I really like Brian Coquard. I think he's good, but he's just not the elite level where he can win stages in the Tour de France. Well, I don't even know if he's won a professional stage win, which is what they were saying on the broadcast. But yeah, we'll see if he can break that duck in stage 19 or 21. Would be pretty cool for him to break that duck on the Champs-Élysées, but we'll see. Next up, we've got As You Deserve Le Mondial. The big news, obviously, for this team, Romain Bardet crashed out. Unfortunately, he has concussion he had concussion following a crash. He either didn't finish stage 13 or didn't start stage 14. I don't know what it was specifically. And then Pierre Latour, also for this team, crashed out in stage 14. So it was a bit of a tumultuous period for As You Deserve. Their top man on the GC classification is Mikhail Sherrill. He sits in 23rd, over an hour back on Primoz Roglic. I guess now the main thing for them is Benoit Cosnefroy. He is in first, 36 points, and second in that competition is Noel Peters with 31 points on the same team. So we'll see what they can do. You'd think he'll be in the breaks for the next 2 days, and if he gets through that, he's pretty much guaranteed it right through to Paris. They're in 8th in the team classification, which is pretty decent from As You Deserve. And then the top 10s, they've had Clement Venturini came 5th in stage 11. Oliver Naesen came 9th and 8th in stage 11 and 14 respectively. So he might be looking at stage 19 in particular. He might have a crack on stage 21, but I'm not sure if he has the pace for that. But yeah, stage 19 might suit him with a little bit of a tougher finish. The next French team we are tackling is Groupama FDJ. Their top man is Valentin Madouas. He is coming 29th, an hour and 20 minutes back on Primoz Roglic. He sits in 4th in the white jersey, so not a bad effort from him, young rider. David Godot sits in 7th in that classification, but he's obviously not really in contention. He's almost 2 hours back. Well, so is Madouas. He's over an hour back, but still good effort from them. They're in 12th in the team classification, which isn't bad considering how poorly their leader has ridden. Sebastian Reichenbach came 8th on stage 12, and Valentin Madouas came 4th on stage 13. But yeah, the main story for Groupama FDJ is that Thibaut Pinot, he cracked before we recorded last week's episode. And sadly, he just has not returned to form. Hopefully the rest day sorts him out and he could maybe be in a breakaway in the next couple stages and have a crack at a win or some polka dot points. But it's just been a Tour de France to forget really for Thibaut Pinot. And it's going to be interesting to see what Groupama FDJ do now. They've really set their team up around him and Arnaud Demar, but for GC, Pinot is basically their only man really. And I hate to be rude, but he's just failed time after time after time, really, in the Grand Tours anyway. And yeah, he's just had so much expectation on him, which must be very tough to deal with, but he has not done it very well, to be honest. And Groupama FDJ must be thinking, what do we do now? Because, do they move on from Thibaut Pinot, or do they put him in a different role? Do they target one-day races with Pinot? So it'll be interesting to see what they do, because he is getting older now, and you would think he's past his prime. Next up, we've got Bora Hansgrohe. They're basically in this for one reason. They're competing for the green jersey. But the rest of the Sagan's kind of just a lone wolf, really, as he always is. So the rest of the team's kind of just doing their own thing. Emmanuel Buchmann, he was their GC guy, but he's not really in contention, is he, with an hour and 24 minutes back. He's in 33rd. Green jersey, Peter Sagan sits in second. He's on 224 points, so he is under 50 points behind Sam Bennett. The next two stages are going to be really important for Peter Sagan. He will struggle to beat Sam Bennett on stage 19 and 21. And then I don't think there's green jersey points up for grabs on the time trial. So Sagan really needs to pick up the points in the mountains, where Bennett is a lot more vulnerable, especially compared to Sagan. So it's going to be a big 2 or 3 stages coming up for him to see if he can win his 8th green jersey, which would just be incredible. Elsewhere in the team, they've got Leonard Kamna sitting in 8th in the white jersey, but as I said before, with Groupama FDJ almost 2 hours back, so pretty irrelevant. 14th in the team classification. In terms of top 10 finishes, they had quite a few actually. They caused a lot of carnage in this week. Peter Sagan came 3rd in stage 10, as expected. Stage 12, Maximilian Schachmann came 6th. Stage 13, Leonard Kamna came 2nd, and Maximilian Schachmann came 3rd. So back-to-back podiums for back-to-back top 10s for Schachmann. That's impressive. And then stage 14, Peter Sagan came 4th in that Sunweb breakaway victory. So yeah, they're doing pretty well. Gregor Mühlberger crashed out on stage 11, but apart from that, they're looking the goods. Quite a few top 10s, and they're causing havoc up the front with Sunweb pretty much every day. And Sagan's attacking that green jersey. I think he made got quite a few points back on Bennett. And I have to say, I successfully predicted that Bennett would hold it come this episode, and Sagan had it at the time of the last recording, so I'm pretty impressed with myself there, to be honest. I still think Sagan, I don't know who's going to go home with it, to be honest. It's going to be very, very close. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how Sagan picks up his points in the mountains. Next up, we've got Israel Startup Nation. Their top GC guys, Dan Martin, he's in 35th, 1 hour and 25 minutes and 10 seconds back. He's actually not dropped much time on Roglic in the last week, which is kind of impressive for Dan Martin. He started the week 1 hour and 5 minutes back, and he's now 1 hour and 25 back, so he's only dropped 20 minutes, which is quite impressive. They're 18th in team classification, nothing special there. Top 10s, Andre Greipel came 6th on stage 10, and Hugo Hofstetter came 8th on stage 11. But yeah, no offense to Israel Startup Nation, pretty mythical team in this year's tour. They haven't been in many breaks. It has to be said, Hugo Hofstetter's really impressed me. That is, on stage 11, he got his 4th top 10 finish. So we're seeing, in quotation marks, superstars of the sport, like Breon Coquart and Case Bowl, really struggling to even get top 5s, let alone wins. And Hofstetter, in a lot weaker team, not so much set up around him, he's whipped out 4 top 10s, so really impressive. Now, next up, we've got Total Direct Energy. Their top GC guy is Romain Sicard. He is 1 hour and 28 minutes back. He sits in 36th. Their team is 21st, so second last in that classification. They had no top 10s. They're not in the top 10 in any jersey, so no offense to them. I'm probably just going to move on because they're pretty irrelevant. And just quietly, I'm not sure why they are the same colours as FDJ. That is really confusing to me. But yeah, next we've got DeCoinic Quickstep. Julian Alaphilippe sits in 40th, 1 hour and 37 back on Roglic. Then in the green jersey, as I keep mentioning, it's Sam Bennett. So he is on DeCoinic Quickstep. He is on 269 points. Then Mikkel Merkov, or Merkov, I don't know how to say that name, 112 points, sits in 7th. And Alaphilippe sits in 8th on 108 points. They're 17th in the team classification. Their 2 top 10s this week came from Bennett in stage 10 and 11, where he got 1st and 2nd respectively, in his duels against Caleb Ewan and Peter Sagan. Julian Alaphilippe looks really busy at the moment. It would not shock me if he whips out a win in the next 2 or 3 stages. He has really been busy. He's getting into breaks. He's attacking. Unfortunately, his reputation is harming him a little bit. Everyone knows how quick he is, so no one wants to work with him because they know he'll burn them in the sprint. I think that happened on the day Mark Hershey won. He was trying to, there was about a pack of 20 of them. He was trying to break away with 2 or 3 to chase down Hershey, and no one wanted to go with him because they knew if he took him to the line, they were just going to beat him. But yeah, hopefully we see some fireworks from Alaphilippe, and it'll be interesting to see Bennett v Sagan, and even Ewan in stage 19 and 21. CCC team, so Triple C team. I can't lie, they've been pretty average. BMC, formerly BMC, were historically one of the biggest teams. They were heavily sponsored. They won Tour de France's with Cadel Evans. They were always very good, always very busy in the races. But this year, I can't lie, they are a very irrelevant team. Greg Van Avermaet is top in the yellow standings for them. He is in 41st and Aaron 40 back. Matteo Trentin is third in the green jersey. He's on 189 points. So he's less than 100 back on Sam Bennett, but I'll be honest, I think he might fall away, but he might go on a few breakaways in the next 2 stages, which could see him wrap up that podium position. They're 15th in the team classification. They had 2 top 10s this week. Simon Geschke came 7th. Matteo Trentin came 7th on stage 13 and 14 respectively. Unfortunately, Ilnur Zakarin, probably their most talented climber, he crashed on stage 12. So that didn't help them in terms of relevance for the mountain stages. But yeah, I guess we'll see how Trentin goes. He could actually help Bennett if he takes points away from Sagan in the mountains. But yeah, that's about as interesting as CCC get this year, helping out first place in the green jersey on another team. Third last team, we've got Sunweb. Having a bit of a strange one. They don't really have anyone competing for jerseys as such, but they're having really good successes on stages. So their top guy in the general classification is Soren Krag Andersen, sitting in 57th, over 2 hours back. Mark Hershey is in 5th at the King of the Mountains, so I guess you could say he's in contention there. But I'd say, I don't know exactly how he's feeling, but surely he's pretty spent. I think he's been in 4 or 5 breakaways, and he's been killing it all fortnight, really. So he's only 5 points back on Cosnefroy, though, so that might be enough motivation to keep him going. Hershey also sits in the top 10 in the white jersey, but he's a long way back. As I said, they don't really have any GC guys, so in team classification, they're 19th. But top 10s, this is where they absolutely killed it this week. I think they might have had more than Trek Segafredo did in the first week, which is very impressive. Case Bowl came 8th on stage 10. Mark Hershey came 1st on stage 12. Soren Krag Andersen came 3rd on stage 12. Nicholas Roach came 10th on stage 12. Soren Krag Andersen came 1st on stage 14. Casper Pedersen came 5th on stage 14. And Mark Hershey came 10th on stage 14. How impressive is that? So I don't know who their director sportif is, but he's putting on a bit of a clinic there with some tactical masterclasses on show, especially on stage 14 with that 2-kilometer breakaway victory. But yeah, Sunweb, they're doing quite well. It's a bit of a weird one, as I said. They're not really relevant to many jerseys, but on not so much the huge mountain stages, but on the hilly stages, they're quite lethal. Case Bowl is probably letting them down a little bit. They've had some great lead-out trains, and he has struggled to even crack the top 10. In this week anyway. He was decent in the first few days. But we'll see how he goes on stage 19 and 21. Second last, we've got Lotto Sudal. Thomas DeGent is their main man, and GC sits in 63rd. Caleb Ewan on the green jersey is in 5th at 158 points. So he's probably too far back to contend, but he will be right in there for the stage victory on stage 19 and 21. Team classification, they sit in last, but that's because they're reduced down to 5 riders. Top 10s, Ewan had a stage win on stage 11, came second on stage 10. So I think Caleb Ewan's probably been one of the most impressive riders this tour. He's only got 4 men to support him on the flat stages, and he is beating the best who have full lead-out trains and everything. So well done to Caleb. He's riding awesome. I love him. I love watching him sprint. But yeah, that's all Lotto Soudal are good for, really. There's a bit of Caleb on the flat stages. It will be interesting to see if Thomas de Gent can do anything in the next few mountain stages. Finally, we've got NTT Pro Cycling. Without being disrespectful, they've probably had a Tour de France to forget. Michael Valgren sits in 67th and GC 2.5 hours behind. Michael Gogol sits in 9th on the King of the Mountains, 12 back on Benoit Cosnefroy. They're 20th in the team classification. Ryan Gibbons produced their only top 10 this week with a 10th on stage 11. But yeah, the real story of the Tour is Giacomo Nizzolo crashing out stage 8, Domenico Pozzovivo crashing out stage 9, and they were by far and away their most talented riders, probably next to Edvald Boasson-Hagen, who might target stage 19. He loves those, kind of little hilly stages. But yeah, that's it for the teams for this week. Now we'll get into a bit of a preview and prediction for this final week. As far as predictions go with the jerseys, I don't want to be boring, but it's got to be Primoz Roglic, doesn't it, for the yellow jersey? He's got a 44-second lead. His team's invincible. He's a time trial specialist, and there's one coming up on the second last stage. I just don't see whether he slips up from here. The only chance is one day he magically just blows up, or he has a mechanical late in the stage and Pogačar takes advantage of that. But I just don't see it happening, unfortunately. He's 40 seconds up, sorry. It would be pretty special if Pogačar could win at the age of 21, and I'd love to see it, but I think he might have to bide his time and wait behind Roglic. In terms of the podium, I do think Pogačar will stay second unless he just lives and dies by the sword and tries to attack Roglic on the last couple mountain stages rather than just settling for second. Could see him blow up, and maybe someone in fourth or fifth could move into that podium position. But I think, if you had to put your money somewhere, you'd probably go the Roglic Pogačar 1-2. They've been the clear standouts this Tour de France. In terms of third, I'll be honest, I don't think Rigoberto Urán will finish third. He looks not as good as some of the others on the climb on stage 15. He got dropped in the end, lost about 15 seconds. So I'm going to go... I'd love to say Richie Porter's an Aussie, but I'm going to say Miguel Angel Lopez. He's a pretty good time trialist, and he's been riding really well in the last few days, and his team's looking in good form now. They started the race a little bit slow, but I'm liking Miguel Angel Lopez. And yeah, for a third, which would be pretty impressive. I don't think I have any other pretty outrageous shouts in terms of the top 10 or anything like that. In terms of the green jersey, I'm going to go Sam Bennett. I'd love to see Peter Sagan win an 8th. I'm not normally one of those guys who loves legends of the sport, your Lewis Hamiltons, Roger Federers, LeBron Jameses, but I'd normally go for the underdog. But I genuinely do really like Peter Sagan, and I would like to see him win his 8th jersey. It would be cool to witness, arguably one of the GOATs of the sport. Just compile a ridiculous list of achievements, but I think Sam Bennett will get it this year. His lead right now is just under 50 points. I think on stage 19 and stage 21, he'll be too good on the bunch sprints, and I'm not sure if Peter Sagan... Well, we'll find out pretty soon, basically. On stage 16, 17, and 18, Sagan has to be ahead of Sam Bennett. If he's going into stage 19 behind him, there's no chance he'll catch him, I don't reckon, barring a Sam Bennett mechanical or crash late. But yeah, I'm liking Bennett for green over Sagan. In terms of the King of the Mountains, I do definitely think it could just be Pogačar or Roglic. I don't know if in the next 3 stages there's summit finishes or there's just climbs throughout. But in terms of the King of the Mountains, I'm going to back in Pierre Rolland. I think Hershey could also be in there with a chance, but I'm going to say Pierre Rolland. He's 10 points behind, but he looked really impressive the last few days in the climbs. White jersey, I think it'll be Pogačar quite comfortably. Enric Mas is 2 minutes and 35 seconds behind Pogačar, so I think he'll do that comfortably. I think that'll be the podium, though. Pogačar, Mass, and Bernal. Fourth is like an hour back, so it's not even in contention really. But yeah, in the team classification, this is really just guesswork. But Trek Sega, they've dropped down to 5th. EF Pro Cycling, they're in 3rd. They could challenge for it. But you've got to back in Movistar. Marc Soler, Enric Mas, Alejandro Valverde, they're too strong. I can't see why they would drop it. Actually, no, I'll go Jumbo-Visma. They've got sensational depth right through their 8 riders, and got some great climbers, so I back them in. Some great time trials as well, where Movistar might lack a little bit on that front. So I'll go Jumbo-Visma. And deservedly so, they've been the best team all race. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me. I'm really looking forward to the final week. I'm excited to see, Ewan versus Bennett maybe on stage 19 and 21. Maybe some outside hopes on those ones. Cockard, Case Bowl, they've come up unlucky so far. Well, maybe not unlucky, maybe just not good enough so far, but we'll see how they go. And yeah, we'll see if maybe a French hopeful Julien Alaphilippe, Thibaut Pinot could get a big stage win in the mountains. Pierre Roland. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. I appreciate you listening this far. And we'll have a end of Tour de France review coming out next week. See ya.